Thinking about food. Thinking about food.
Well, hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Imago Nutrition Podcast, where we answer your questions and give you practical nutrition strategies to help you achieve your goals and to help your family flourish. And I am excited for today's episode because it's one of my many and probably my longest favorite topics. It's one of my favorite topics to talk about. I've been in the nutrition and fitness space for about 15 years, and I've been talking about the importance of macronutrients for all 15 of them. And so I'm excited to talk about the question of what are macros? And so if you've heard this term thrown out in conversations about nutrition, fitness, health, well-being, et cetera, this is the episode for you. We're going to talk about what macronutrients are, or macros are. We're going to talk about why they matter, and we'll talk even about some specific foods that provide a healthy, wide array of these macronutrients. And so with that, if you have a question that you would like to submit to us, you can head over to the Imago Nutrition website, which is imagonutrition.com, IMAGO nutrition.com/podcast. And there's a form there that you can fill out, real quick and easy form. And you can send us your nutrition questions, and either myself, Danielle, or both of us will look at it and possibly use it as a future topic of a podcast episode. And so with that, I'm excited to jump into this topic. What are macros? And so, as I said, this is a term that gets thrown out quite a bit. There's some confusion around it. There's even an entire, quote, nutrition framework called If It Fits in Your Macros that's out there. And so you can Google that and see that that's kind of a movement really based off understanding macros, tracking macros, staying within, quote unquote, your macros. And so macros have gotten quite a bit of press recently in the nutrition spaces, rightfully so to some degree. But we're going to talk about and clarify exactly what they are, why they matter, the benefits to the body, and some specific foods that can get you a wide array of these macros. So with that, macronutrients, or macros as they're called, are nutrients that provide the body with calories or energy. And that's really one and the same, because a calorie, a kcal, is a unit of energy, okay? So a macronutrient is technically a nutrient that gives your body energy via calories, unlike micronutrients, which is a topic for another episode, which do not give your body energy. They are important for function and health. However, they do not come with calories, and they do not give your body energy. They provide other benefits. And so nutrients, of course, are substances that are needed for growth, metabolism, optimal health, immune function, many other body functions. And so nutrients, of course, are super important. These are the macronutrients. Macro obviously means large. And so the easiest way to think about this is that these are the nutrients your body needs in large amounts. Okay. So large amounts of these nutrients can be optimal, and is optimal for your health. And we will take a look at some of these macronutrients. So with that, when we talk about macros, we are generally talking about three. Those are carbohydrates, protein, and fats. Now, fun little fact, alcohol is technically a macronutrient. It contains ethanol, which our body can use for energy, but in and of itself, it doesn't contain any essential nutrient value. And without it, you're not at risk for any sort of deficiency. So therefore, when we talk about macros, we're not often including alcohol. That's just a fun tip for your day, is that alcohol is technically a macronutrient. However, when we talk in the nutrition space about macros, we're generally talking about carbohydrates, protein, and fats. So sometimes you'll hear people say, oh, I'm tracking macros. And really what they're doing is they're tracking calories via macronutrient breakdown. And so carbohydrates, 1 gram of carbohydrate has 4 calories. 1 gram of protein has 4 calories. 1 gram of fat has 9 calories. And so it's often a little interesting when people say, well, I don't like tracking calories. I prefer to track macros. Well, technically it's the same thing, because if you're tracking your macros by gram, there's a math equivalent to that. So, but all that to say, those are generally the 3 macronutrients that we are talking about: carbohydrates, protein, and fats. All right, so let's talk a little bit about why these matter for the body. We'll start with carbohydrates, okay? Arguably the nutrient your body needs in largest supply, even relative to protein and fats, okay? So what are the benefits of carbohydrates? And as a side note, carbohydrates are under attack right now. We're recording this in 2022, and year after year, it seems, carbs continue to be under attack, whether it was through Atkins, whether it was a South Beach diet, now with keto. There's this movement to demonize carbohydrates, and it's completely silly, and it's not rooted in sound nutrition science. Okay, the benefits of carbohydrates are ample, they are real, and the lack of carbohydrates can be felt in a very real way. So, number one, carbohydrates provide your body's main source of fuel. All right. So carbohydrates can be easily used by your body for energy. And they are found and used in all tissues and cells in our body can use glucose for energy. So carbohydrates get broken down into glucose, and all of our tissues and cells use glucose for energy. That's just a huge, huge benefit. This is why I've got, clients that are marathon runners, and we focus very heavily and in a very substantial way on their carbohydrate percentage intake, because it is such a beautiful source of fuel for the body. It's efficient. It can be used properly for proper health outcomes. This is also, by the way, this is lesser known about carbohydrates, is that it's actually needed for the central nervous system, the kidneys, the brain, and muscles, including the heart, to function properly. Okay, one of the frustrations I have about the whole keto movement is that keto was really designed for children with epilepsy. Okay, so what they found is that with epilepsy and with seizures, you've got an overactive central nervous system, and so by reducing carbohydrate intake, you can often minimize or even eliminate some of those seizures by this dramatic reduction in carbohydrates. However, unless you're a child with epilepsy, under the guidance of a doctor, you likely do not need to be on keto. Okay, because this is the nutrient that, again, helps fuel the central nervous system, kidneys, brain, muscles, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another benefit. Carbohydrates can also be stored in the muscles and the liver, and later used for energy, which is a great benefit as well. They're also important. I think our last episode was on fiber. Keep in mind, fiber is technically a carbohydrate, though it doesn't get broken down in the body. It passes through undigested, but carbohydrates are important for intestinal health and waste elimination. Okay, so lots of benefits. There are even more, but lots of benefits to carbohydrates. Don't be afraid of carbohydrates. Intake a proper amount from really nutrient-dense sources of carbohydrates. And some foods, some examples, if you're looking for some examples of foods that are carbohydrate-rich, you can start by all fruits and veggies, okay, are really terrific sources of carbohydrates. That's what they are primarily. Most fruits and carbohydrates are primarily carbohydrate. You've got things like beans and legumes, okay? You've got brown rice and brown rice pastas and all the cool things that are being done with brown rice these days. Those are terrific sources of carbohydrates. You've got oatmeals, non-flavored. Don't get the flavored stuff. Get the whole grain oatmeals, quinoa, rye, sweet potatoes, whole wheat breads, whole wheat English muffins, yams, et cetera, et cetera. These are all examples of carbohydrate-rich foods that you should not be afraid of, that you should be including in a wide array in your nutritional regimen for optimal health outcomes. Okay, so that's carbohydrates. Now let's talk about protein. Protein, of course, has tons of benefits. Perhaps most known for, yes, its ability to help build, repair, and maintain muscle mass, which is key for many health outcomes in terms of stability and aging. It keeps your metabolism high. Having muscle, of course, is terrific for metabolic rate. But just in general, one of the biggest benefits is growth. And it's especially important for children, teens, pregnant women to have the nutrient that is primarily responsible for growth. What I often say with clients is, whereas carbohydrates and fats are primarily a source of energy, protein is primarily a source of building things within the body. Okay. And so growth is one of the biggest benefits of having optimal protein, or having protein in your macronutrient mix. It also helps repair tissue. It helps with immune function. It helps making essential hormones and enzymes. It can be used for energy if carbohydrates and fats are in short supply, but you really don't want to get to a point where your body is burning protein for energy. Again, that's not its primary source. You want to make sure you've got a healthy amount of carbohydrates, healthy amount of fats in your system so that your body is consistently burning, and it does consistently burn between carbohydrates and fats. It kind of goes back and forth depending on intensity of the workout, et cetera, et cetera. But you almost don't want to get to a place where your body is burning protein for energy. Again, we want it building things in the body, not necessarily just being used to keep the body going. Okay. And as I said, it preserves lean muscle mass. Keeping that muscle mass is key for long-term health outcomes. And so protein, super, super important. And so when we talk about examples of protein-rich foods, there's generally two kind of major buckets. And so one is meat, seafood bucket. The other one is dairy. We've got a prior episode. If you're like, well, I'm a vegetarian, I'm a vegan. We've got a prior episode. I can't remember the exact title. It's something about how do I get enough protein if I don't eat meat? So if you are a vegetarian or a vegan, be sure to go back to that episode because we talk about some of the foods that you can be incorporating to ensure that you hit optimal protein within that nutritional framework. But in general, when we're talking about protein-rich sources of food, we'll take a look at the meat seafood category. So this is your chicken breasts, your fatty fishes like herring and mackerel and salmon and sardines and trout and tuna. Ground meat, whether that's 90-10 or 93-7 in terms of lean fat. Things like shrimp, scallops, cuts of beef or pork that have tip, top, loin, or round in them. This is something that Danielle taught me when we first started working together. I just always said, get lean cuts. But I really love her little way to remember that, which is tip, top, loin, or round. And so if it's tri-tip or pork, loin, or eye of round steak, that's a way to remember when you're shopping for red meat. You want tip, top, loin, or round in the name of it. Turkey breast, of course, is a lean source of protein. White fish like catfish, cod, haddock, pollock, tilapia, et cetera, et cetera. That's that meat seafood category of that lean protein that gets you up in this macronutrient category. And also dairy. So keep in mind eggs, egg whites, kefir, which we talked about also in the vegetarian or how to get enough protein if you don't eat meat episode. Low-fat cottage cheese, low-fat milk. Remember that if you're choosing a plant-based milk, like I prefer almond milk and cashew milk, et cetera, you want to look for one that is ideally fortified with vitamin D, okay? There's also low-fat or non-fat Greek yogurt. I eat that on the daily. In fact, I was texting with a client today. She's like, I'm trying to get up to my protein goal, and I don't really like the taste of non-fat Greek yogurt. And so I said, hey, what about throwing in a scoop of chocolate protein powder? Boosts your protein even more, flavors it up. It's really great. Okay. So even if you're in that camp where you haven't acquired the taste for Greek yogurt, there's some fun things you can do. Throw in some strawberries, throw in some chia seeds. It's delicious. Okay. You want to take a look at those of having a minimum of 5 probiotics, by the way, and low added sugar if it's flavored. Again, I don't get any of the flavored stuff, but if you are getting a flavored Greek yogurt, just look for one as low as possible in the added sugar, okay? There's also things like part skim, ricotta cheese, et cetera, et cetera. So all that's to say lots of benefits to protein, of course. And that, by the way, whether you've got fat loss goals, muscle gain goals, optimal health goals, fitness optimization goals, protein is super important to get optimized. And so if we can help you in that regard, reach out to us, head over to imagonutrition.com/contact. I think it's /contact, or just click the contact us button in the navigation. We can walk you through within your goals, how to optimize protein. And then of course, how carbohydrates and fats play into that as well. Okay. Enough of the plug. Back to our macronutrients. And our third one is fats. Okay. Again, something that has, I think it was back in the 70s when we were kind of at the start of the anti-fat crave, and we came out with the food pyramid, and we started pointing people more toward carbohydrates and away from fats. We've talked about carbohydrates are good, but we don't want that to be at the exclusion of fats. Okay, and so we're several decades into a bit of the anti-fat undertones in our culture. There was the whole fat-free craze. Of course, all they were doing was slamming more sugar in the back door with all these foods, but everything was being packaged as being fat-free, just also high in sugar. So don't be afraid of fats either. Lots of benefits with fats. Normal growth and development comes from fats. Energy can be drawn from fats. Of course, it's actually the most concentrated source of energy is within fats. Okay, remember that 1 gram of carbohydrate has 4 calories. 1 gram of fat has 9 calories. Okay, it's more than double in terms of that energy density. The fat also helps us absorb certain vitamins like A, D, E, and K. So that's also very key. It provides cushioning for the organs. It helps us maintain cell membranes. It provides taste and consistency and stability to foods. Okay, so fats are terrific. We generally want to be focused on unsaturated fats, whether that's polyunsaturated or monounsaturated. We want to be minimizing saturated fat. We want to be minimizing as much as possible, if not excluding trans fats. We can go into that in some other episode of exactly what those are. But be focused on turning that label over, taking a look at your food, and focusing on foods that have a high value fat in terms of polyunsaturated, monounsaturated fats. Okay. Just remember unsaturated fat is what we're looking for in general. Some examples of these foods that are high in fat is fatty fish. Like I mentioned in the protein section, herring and mackerel and salmon and sardines and trout and tuna. I love salmon. If you take a look at the salmon nutrients, I mean, it's as much of, a source of fat as it is protein. It's a very glorious food. Nuts and seeds are also terrific delivery systems for healthy fats. Think almonds, think cashews, think flax seeds, et cetera, et cetera. Avocados, which are technically a fruit, great source of fat, probably predominantly a source of fat. Okay, unlike a lot of other fruits, which are predominantly a source of carbohydrate, avocados, terrific source of fat. Nut butters. So your peanut butters, you're looking for 2 ingredient, maybe at most 3 ingredient natural peanut butters. I know there's some, yuckiness around all the oil. Don't be afraid of that. Some people get spooked by that. Generally, you're looking for those nut butters that have just 2 ingredients, really just the nut and salt as a preservative. Okay. Olives are a great source. Olive oil, great source of fat. Also oil, vinegar-based dressings as well. All right. So with that, those are our 3 macronutrients. Okay. So we've got our carbohydrates, our protein, and our fats. And the concluding point is really just that remember that each of these macronutrients plays an important role in the body. So all these diet culture nonsense frameworks or diets that are coming out are a lot of times attacking one or more macronutrient. And so we don't want to do that. We want to have a healthy array of macronutrients and because consistently consuming a proper balance of all 3 macronutrients is essential to your body's ability to function optimally. Okay. And so your body needs different things from these 3 macronutrients, and therefore it's looking for those things to function optimally. And so we want to source it with the resources that it needs to do so. Okay. So that was a lot of information, but here's, I want to give you a free resource too, if that helps. You're like, wow, I didn't have time to write down all those foods, Mark. I'm not going to remember. I'm on my walk. I'm in my car. I couldn't jot things down. No worries. Here's the one thing you can do to get a list of these foods. We've already provided a free resource on our website. We call it the grocery or the starter grocery list. Okay. So if you go over to imagonutrition.com, again, IMAGO nutrition.com/free, you'll see a starter grocery list. And what that does is that provides a list of arguably some of the best, most nutrient dense foods widely available here in the United States at your local grocery store. And it's broken out by section. It's got meat, seafood, it's got pantry, it's got frozen, et cetera, et cetera. So we broke it down in an intuitive way to help you source some of the foods that we talked about and some others that are, again, as I said, nutrient dense and that give you a wide array of these macronutrients, which are so important. So again, head over to the website. You just heard a whole bunch of information in this podcast. And so no worries if you didn't have a chance to write it down. Just head over to imagonutrition.com/free, download the free starter grocery list, and you can just take that with you to the grocery store. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's just a resource to help guide you toward the foods that will get you a healthy array of these macros. All right. So with that, if you found this episode valuable and helpful and insightful, we would love for you to subscribe to the podcast, review, and share with a friend that maybe has questions about macros, or what's this term that people are talking about? What are they? Why do I need them? Et cetera, et cetera. If you're on social media, feel free to follow us. We are on pretty much all the channels at Imago Nutrition, so IMAGO Nutrition. And as always, I want to thank our friends over at in the Happy Pill Band for giving us our theme song titled Thinkin Bout Food.
Thinking about food. Thinking about food.